YouTube, what is good? Today we're coming right back at you with another video. Today we're going to be talking about how to read pitches. Now we have gone through our hitting tips before, and in that video I did say that a lot of these tips do get a lot easier when you're actually recognizing how to read the pitches, but that's what this video is going to serve its purpose for. If you need help anything with these tips even more, add something in the comments below. I'll be sure to help you as much as I can. Just like with the hitting tips as well, I do want to mention that all of these pitches are going to be an all-star difficulty. However, these still do apply for Hall of Fame and Legend. But with that being said, let's get right into the first pitch, looking at our fastballs. So to start out here, we are going to be facing Randy Johnson with Aaron Judge at the plate. Randy Johnson's always a really hard pitcher to hit, so I feel like if I can tell y'all how to hit him, how to read against him, it's going to be a really easy way to kind of learn that kind of learning curve. But going into the game, every single time I'm ready to receive a pitch, I'm looking anywhere between his glove and the top of his hat, wherever the logo would be on his hat. Granted, that is just something that I do. You don't necessarily need to do that yourself. If you find another spot on the pitcher that you think helps you better looking at a particular spot, definitely do that if that feels much more comfortable to you. Now, it's weird saying that, you aren't necessarily looking at his hand. When he does break away from his glove, that is when I then look at his hand. Certain pitchers with their certain animations, they have different arm slots. The ball will come out of that arm slot every time. With practice, you recognize where those arm slots are, and honestly, even after a couple pitches, you can learn it pretty quickly. But once he breaks away from his glove, I look at wherever that arm slot is going to be. And obviously for Randy Johnson, it's a little bit weirder just because of his animation, but being able to recognize where that arm slot is and being able to watch that as the ball is coming out of the hand is a really important thing. But letting him throw his first fastball here, the fastball is pretty straightforward. There are some pitches in this game that do have a bit of like I call it an animation out of the hand. If the pitch looks like it's going to just be a straight dart out of his hand, if it comes directly out of his hand, it doesn't go left, it doesn't go right, it doesn't go up, it doesn't go down, that is most likely going to be a fastball or some sort of fastball variant, like a cutter or a sinker. We'll talk about both of those as well, though. But specifically this for the fastball, this one, it's unique in a way that it doesn't move. Obviously we all know how fastballs work in baseball. There's not really a lot of movement to them, but coming out of the hand directly, you'll see this with other pitches later on in this video. They either immediately start higher, they immediately start a little bit more to the right, a little bit more to the left. This one is directly straight, and I call it basically a dart straight to the strike zone. So now starting with his slider, this is something that I'm going to actually slow down a little bit later on when we're talking about this pitch and zoom in on it, because if you notice it, especially on the outside pitch here and the outside slider, the ball actually starts away from Aaron Judge here. So if you're throwing an outside slider to a righty as a lefty, the ball will actually kind of work towards the left-hand batter's box first, and then it'll make its way back into the inside part of the zone. It does that a little bit when you're throwing it inside as well, but it's not nearly as as sharp as it would be or as noticeable as it would be on an outside slider. That's like for me, if I'm pitching, if I'm throwing outside sliders, I might throw maybe one an inning if I absolutely have to, because realistically, if you're doing that, it's really easy to see. There's a pattern to it that's easy to see, and it's going to end up getting hit. So next up, we have the splitter. Now, the splitter is a little bit weird. It's one of those pitches that might look like a fastball coming out of the hand in certain spots, but if you play this game enough, if you practice enough, you do recognize that coming out of the hand, it is a lot slower than a fastball would be, especially against a guy like Randy. However, kind of like a changeup, the splitter actually starts a little bit higher out of his hand. It kind of goes up just a tiny bit, and then it starts to dive down. So if you're able to recognize that, especially you saw that on that low splitter there, the ball kind of goes up out of his hand just for a tiny bit, and then it dips down again into the bottom of the zone. This is a similar movement to a changeup. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. But this is, if you're able to recognize the splitter, this is similar to a forkball in terms of movement. The forkball is a little bit more obvious when it's got that little bump to it. And being able to recognize splitter versus changeup, that all depends on pitch mixes. I don't think there's any player in this game that has both, so I don't really think you need to worry about that. But being able to read that slight little bump out of the hand and then watching it dive and move down as it gets to the strike zone will help you recognize that pitch really well. So next up is going to be the sinker. Now, the sinker is one of the harder pitches to hit in this game, solely just because out of the hand it looks so much like a fastball. The reason for that is because it basically is a fastball until it's about halfway to the strike zone where it starts to bend back towards you for a righty against a righty. Now, we swapped to Pedro Martinez here since Randy Johnson does not throw a sinker. However, as you can see, coming out of the hand, it looks a lot like a fastball, and then about either a quarter of the way there to about halfway there, you do see the ball start to bend back towards the batter here. Now, that's going to be your indicator that a sinker is coming, and especially, we've seen what's called our meta pitchers, those guys who throw the 100-mile-an-hour sinker. This is part of the reason of why those guys are so good, because for you to be able to recognize that, oh, this is a sinker over a fastball or a sinker over another pitch, you're already burning about a quarter of the way of the time to actually react to that ball. So this is one of those pitches that you probably want to sit on if you're, just going into a game, not really knowing your opponent's tendencies. It's always best to time up the best fastball or the best sinker and then slow down everything else. But because it is a little bit harder, because there is a little bit of a delay for you to be able to truly see, oh, this is a sinker, once the ball is actually thrown, that's where it's going to be a big indicator saying, okay, this is what we're going to do, and, I can actually recognize that this is a sinker once it starts to bend. So next up is going to be the changeup. Now, we're not going to cover each individual changeup because they are all pretty similar to what you would see for all the others. Circle change, Vulcan change. They're all the same. It's really just the velocities that change, not so much the movement of the actual pitch. Now, Pedro here throws a circle changeup, so it's going to be a little bit slower than your typical changeup. But as I was talking about with the splitter, when he throws the pitch, it kind of starts up a little bit, and then it would fall down. If you start high changeups like that, I don't know why you ever would. It's kind of harder to see. But, with the low changeup, like I said, it comes out of his hand a little high. You see it's about, neck level when it's, about halfway to the plate, and then it starts to fall off, and it hits the bottom of the strike zone. Now, this is kind of a really important thing to see because, again, if you're recognizing speeds coming out of the hand, the ball does actually look different depending on what pitcher is being thrown, and especially what speeds are being thrown. If you can kind of sit there and recognize, okay, this pitch is, hanging up a little bit, you see that it is just a slower velocity, so I call it looping a little bit. That is one of those things you could be like, okay, this is a changeup, let me go adjust to that and get my timing on it. Again, same thing for changeup and Vulcan change. It's just the velocities are going to be a little bit different. So next up is going to be the curveball. In my opinion, the curveball is probably the easiest pitch in the game to recognize as being thrown. Not only is it just super easy to read, but it is also most likely to be hung in this game. This also applies to the slurve, the 12-6 curveball, the sweeping curveball. Now, the slurve is a tiny bit better this year than it was in previous years. However, the animations and the just overall, I call it the loopiness of the pitch, it still stays the same. If you haven't seen it already, it's pretty obvious when he's throwing the curveball because it just literally just goes straight up and it kind of, it curves into the strike zone. But when you see that big arch coming out of the hand like that, it's very noticeable, it's very recognizable, and it is something that I feel like even just the worst players in this game are able to recognize pretty quickly that, okay, this isn't a fastball, this isn't a slider, it's going to hold up, it's going to be slower. It's pretty easy and recognizable out of the hand, and really there aren't many guys in the league that are in this game that have a great curveball. There's a couple guys like Eric Gagne or Clayton Kershaw where it just it's so slow it's hard to hit, but overall being able to see the pitch out of the hand, it's pretty obvious just by watching it and seeing, okay, the ball is going straight up in the air and then coming back down. So now we have the cutter, and there's no other person to try the cutter out than with Mariano Rivera. Now, the cutter is kind of similar to the sinker in a sense, and it's also kind of like the slider in a sense. when it comes to like movement out of the hand. I kind of like to call this pitch the mini slider, where, you know, it's not as obvious coming out of the hand as it is with a slider with like the big like kind of loop around into the strike zone. But coming out of the hand, it does very briefly kind of start away from the pitcher and then works its way back towards the strike zone. Now, again, not exactly the easiest thing to read, especially if they also have a slider as well. But then again, that also makes it a bit more effective when you are throwing a pitcher with a slider and a cutter, especially with a good fastball on top of that. This is one of those things where, you know, it's typically a middle speed between that slider and four seam as well. So it's a good way to throw somebody off because not a lot of people can recognize it super quickly and be able to get on it. Now, like I said, it does start a little bit away from the pitcher and then quickly works its way back into the zone because of that increased velocity. But this is one of those ones you kind of have to practice a little bit. And honestly, you can go into custom practice for any of these pitches and just watch them come out of the hand. You can go to an offline game, run replays as they're throwing it, as you can see it. And then, of course, you know, I have this in this video where I kind of slow it down, zoom it in, and break it down for you. And the last pitch is, of course, not covered, is the knuckleball. We're not even going to talk about the knuckleball. There's no way to hit that damn thing. The reason I say that, I mean that jokingly, of course, but it's very random in how it's thrown. It all depends if the person's on analog, on pinpoint, what the animations are like. Matt Waldron's an absolute demon in this game, and I hope to God that he doesn't get any better, because that card will be an absolute nightmare. But with that being said, that is going to be all for today's video. I hope these tips helped you. Leave in the comments below what method that you use to read best pitches. Let me know what you think of this video, and if this helped you at all. As always, please be sure to leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel. As always, I appreciate you guys. I will catch y'all in the next video, and I hope y'all have a great day.